Hello and welcome to my Detonate Bloodmage build. First I wanted to talk about who this build is for. This build is good on a budget, so if it's your first character, you just beat the campaign, this is a build for you. I played this build since Act 3 and it demolished anything in its path since. It's also great if you want to have an all-round build that can do all content in the game reasonably well. It's a very good boss killer due to its high damage and high self-sustain. You're not reliant on flasks at all, although they do help sometimes. And of course it's for all the blood mages that feel they bricked their build because they end up killing themselves. This build bypasses this issue by having very low mana costs and therefore having very low life costs as well. Now, who isn't it for? It's not for speed mappers or people that are looking for a meta build. Don't get me wrong, this build is good. I would give it an A tier, but it's just not S tier. The inherent clunkiness of using minions, them having stupid AI sometimes, pathfinding problems, keeps it from being S tier. It's also not for people who look for a build to play the campaign with. This build is only possible after getting the sacrifice skill, which is level 58. I would suggest leveling with minions and Bone Storm to keep the respecking costs low, although I didn't try it myself. With that out of the way, let's get to the build. The basic mechanics of the build are using Detonate Dead, which usually requires a corpse, but with Sacrifice we can use our minion as corpses. For the minion we detonate, we use the Skeletal Brute just because it has the highest life pool, and Detonate Dead's damage scales with the life of the corpse detonated. If we detonate our minions all the time, we need replacements, so to solve that problem we have the Skeletal Cleric to revive them, and we also stack the stat chance not to consume minions. We get to a 75 or 80% chance that our skeletons will just survive it. Now, solving the mana issue, like I mentioned, the trick is not using a max level detonated, but a level 7 one, which is the minimum level to get it. At this level it has a very low mana cost, and the flat damage that goes up with gem levels doesn't matter for our build, because we only care about the second part, which doesn't scale with levels. As defensive layers, we have the Ascendancy, Bloodmage, which provides us with a huge amount of defense. First of all, we have essentially 25% damage reduction. The dot doesn't really matter, we just sustain it. And a huge increase in life from this node. We also got quite a lot of sustain from having access to Spell Leech. And you shouldn't underestimate this node. It grants you the skill Life Remnants, which essentially turn Path of Exile in Diablo 3. Enemies will drop life globes, and they can heal you above your usual max HP. So in maps it's not uncommon to have twice the amount of health I have right now. The second layer is the Cloak of Flame. It converts physical damage you take to fire damage, and cause we have 75% fire resistance, this constitutes a 30% damage reduction against physical damage. We also use Mind Over Matter, but not this keystone, because it has a horrendous downside. We use these nodes, and we allocate this one to get 34% of the damage taken from mana before life. This also has the side benefit of being able to see when you're getting chunked by huge hits, because your mana will go down. Usually your life is at 200%, so the life bar won't change even if you get a huge hit. Next up are the skills we use. Of course there's Detonate Dead, which I mentioned, and the supports are Corpse Conservation, to get 25% more chance for corpses not to be destroyed. Then Brutality, because it's a nice damage multiplier, and deal no elemental damage is no issue, since the fire damage here doesn't matter, it's only physical damage that matters. Then I got Minion Pact at the moment for more damage, and we just siphon a bit of life of your minions when you cast. That's not a problem with my gear, but if your minions don't have as much life as mine do, don't use it, you just kill your skeletal clerics. And then for mapping I use Magnified Effect. I have some other gems in my inventory for hot swapping, Concentrated Effect for bosses, and Ambush for the crit variant of this build. Next up is Sacrifice, just a permanent aura thingy to enable the build. Skeletal Brutes, we just try to give them as much life as possible, so we use Meat Shield, Minion Mastery for an extra level, and Physical Mastery for another extra level. Then we use the Skeletal Cleric to res our Brutes, and I just gave him Elemental Army so he survives a bit better. Then we have the Eye of Winter. It's just for debuffing the enemy with critical weakness, which gives 10% more base crit chance, which is huge. It basically doubles your crit chance against bosses. It's supported with Pierce, which doesn't do anything, and Arcane Tempo, so I can cast it more quickly. Then there's Soul Offering. It's the buff that impales the minion. It gives a huge damage buff. It's supported with longer duration and less mana cost. Vulnerability. I don't know how much it does. I just have it in there. I rarely use it. You don't need it. Then there's Blink. This is only used against the final boss of Sanctum. It has increased cooldown recovery rate and a second charge for that. But I rarely use it, just really for that boss. For the passive tree, I will make it short. I'm not going over my entire tree. I will link 3 versions. The starter version after the campaign, a crit version, and the version I'm using right now, the defensive variant. And I just want to mention some keynotes, some really important ones. For example, this cluster here with chance not to consume corpses is really important and make the build feel really good. Next up are the minion life clusters. These are also essential and should be spec'd as fast as possible. This one, this one, this one, this one, and here a couple nodes. And then the before mentioned Mind Over Matter package. This, and anoint this. This one is really important because when you get hit for all your mana, you instantly recoup enough to continue casting your spells, otherwise Mind Over Matter doesn't feel great. What do I mean by Mind Over Matter? It's damage taken from mana before life. And very important, the area nodes. Increased area here and here. These are essential for this build to feel good. It will work without them, but it feels so much better using them. Lastly, you have the crit clusters, which you spec last, essentially. You spec them when you get the points and when you slowly transition into crit. You can even use the support gem Controlled Destruction, which disables your crit but gives you more damage, while you have not enough crit yet. Lastly, I have to mention Eldritch Battery. This is specific for this variant of the build, because it uses a body armor with huge energy shield pool, so it gives a lot of mana, which helps us with the Mind Over Matter. Not to forget are the jewels. I pretty much got the same jewels in everything. Increased minion life, increased global fist damage, and recently my minions started to die sometimes, so I added some jewels with physical damage reduction. But this is not necessary until you really reach the end game. I didn't have this before and they didn't die anyway. Now I want to talk a bit about Magia. This is the old version of Magia. I choose this one because it's easy to obtain, pretty cheap, and I think for more viewers useful. So the uniques I use are this wand, which just adds more chance not to consume corpses. It's very important. The Cloak of Flame for defense, like mentioned earlier. And going over every piece of gear is useless for you, because you don't get the exact same pieces, so I just want to explain the core concepts and core stats you need. Firstly, increased minion level is your best damage stat, so you get it on the helmet and on the scepter. It's much more important than the increased minion life. So what's my strategy to getting the rest of the gear? You have to identify which stat on the gear is rare, and then buy the items first that are rare, and buy the cheap ones around them to cap resistance, because whatever. So gloves are pretty much a filler slot, so is belt, and rings. You can also craft some of your gear, like what I did. I crafted this helmet for future use, just by buying a magic helmet with level of minion, gems and life for 10 exalts, then used a greater essence of flame to almost guarantee the fire resistance, and then used some exalts on it. This is a lucky example, not the average run I think, but being smart will save you some currency. In my current version of the build, I found this insane chest and just used this gloves to fix the resistances. They are just as good as the other ones, just different resistances. But the chest has just an insane amount of energy shield and also intelligence and resistance, which are nice for us. I will now just show the gear to make a complete impression, but the stats I haven't mentioned yet aren't that important. Just remember, get life where you can and cap your resistances. And get enough secondary stats so you can use your gear. So, this is the wand, this is my helmet, my budget helmet, this is my amulet, my one ring, my other ring, gloves, belt, boots, and a scepter, and a cloak of flame, and my old gloves. Now, some tips and tricks for the build. You can, in options, bind the direct minion key. I bound it to an extra mouse button, and just hold it all the time, so you don't have to wait for your minions to come to you or run next pack. They will just follow your cursor around. This will make the playstyle much smoother. With this you can also open chests. Walls can also block your line of sight, preventing you from detonating your dead. So can mobs sometimes. It's quite annoying. I succeed on the third try here. It's only really an issue in tight corridors or when monsters swarm you, like in rituals. Just try to reposition and try again. That usually fixes it. So what are my plans for the future with this build? Future upgrades? I want to use this helmet, so I have to fix resistances around it. And I want to change all my gear so it only requires intelligence, because other secondary stats are hard to come by and you really need those suffix slots. So I want to get rid of those boots. And then use the suffix slots I gained to cap my chaos resistance, because it's the only thing I sometimes die to. Chaos damage. Then I maybe want to get another charm slot in the belt to be stun immune. And then I will look at the weapon swap mechanic and make a boss and a map clear setup, so I don't have to gam swap anymore. Is this likely to get nerfed? Well, I don't think so, and if so, just a numbers adjustment. And I cleared T15 maps with only clerics, which have a third of the life or less than the druids, so with a third of my damage the build is still fine. I wouldn't worry about it. Lastly, I want to mention my other content on the channel. I have demonstrations, map showcases, stuff like that, and the journey to this guide documented. And I will post future updates to the guide there too. This guide is filmed after update 5, so if there's any newer updates, I probably updated the build a bit. Thanks to my sponsor, my cousin who bought me a microphone for Christmas. And thanks to my subscriber Alexa, seeing that there are people who enjoy my builds and follow them motivated me to make this video. That would be all. Thanks for watching, guys. Have a great day.